Hi, this is Alex Kantrowitz. I'm the host of Big Technology Podcast, a longtime reporter and an on-air contributor to CNBC. And if you're like me, you're trying to figure out how artificial intelligence is changing the business world and our lives. So each week on Big Technology, I bring on key actors from companies building AI tech and outsiders trying to influence it, asking where this is all going. They come from places like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, and plenty more. So if you want to be smart with your wallet, your career choices, in meetings with your colleagues, and at dinner parties, listen to Big Technology Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
What if a way a child thinks and creates is actually the way they're learning to understand the world? Welcome to Big Little Lessons. I'm Jenny, and I'm here with my longtime teaching partner,
Kristine. Hi, Jenny.
Oh, I can't believe we spent 50 years in the kindergarten classroom. Elementary rooms, and many of those in kindergarten.
Yes, combined.
Today we're talking about creativity, not as something extra, but as something essential. As a way children express themselves, process their experiences, and make sense of the world around them.
Today we're joined by Kusum Harchandrai Nairi. She is an art educator, creative mentor, and mother of 2 boys. She's also a lifelong artist and a kindergarten through 12th grade art educator who has spent over 25 years working with children, helping them use their creativity to better understand themselves. We're so happy you're here today, Kusum.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to see you. Do you want to tell everybody where you grew up?
So I grew up in Bombay in India, and I went to a school that's not too much different than the school that I currently teach at. You know, we had uniforms, and we had a lot of similar practices. There was a morning chapel, and the academics were pretty structured, and we had sports after school. And a couple of times a year, we went to a church, and there was a church service. And I did that school, 1st grade to 12th grade.
Oh, okay.
Did you go to school before that school, or was that when you started school, in 1st grade?
My family lived in the Middle East until I was, I think, 6.
Oh.
So I did kindergarten in the Middle East in Dubai, and then we moved to India.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Do you remember that?
I remember the move. I remember it feeling challenging as a child.
How so?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was that I had a nanny that took care of me, and she didn't move with us.
Oh. So you had to leave your nanny behind.
She ended up moving somewhere else.
Okay.
She got another job somewhere else. But, you know, just the routines and the rhythm shifted quite a bit for me.
So that was a big move. So you started a school, 1st grade, how many students were there approximately? Was it similar to the school we work in?
I think so. I think there might have been a few more students, maybe 30 in a class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a traditional private school. So in India, there's different types of education. And so that was going to a private school in India is a good education.
So my understanding of what was available at the time for schooling was you could go to a government school.
Right.
Or you could go to a school that had been created by a church, which was the outcome of the colonial times.
Right.
And the reason my parents chose the private school option was because everything was taught in English. And they also went to schools that were similar and were taught in English, even though their families didn't speak much English.
So all your lessons were in English, and then you spoke Hindi at home?
All my lessons were in English, except for the language lessons, which were Hindi and Marathi. And at home, my grandmother spoke a language called Sindhi, which is a language from what's now Pakistan. And my parents would speak to her in Sindhi. My mom grew up in a part of India where they spoke a different language. So she spoke Konkani.
Okay.
And Bombay is in the state of Maharashtra. So a lot of people on the street don't speak Hindi, they speak Marathi. So I grew up with a lot of languages around me that was similar but not the same. And I could speak most of them a little bit,
Yeah.
or some combination of all of them, but none of them really well except for English.
That's so interesting. Different languages that were similar but different. I've heard when people learn more than 3 languages, they just have a opening to learning other languages with a little bit more ease. Would you find that to be your case?
I don't know. I think growing up in India where there are so many languages going on all the time, it's hard to really think about it so much.
Okay.
I chose French as my other language in high school, and then I did that in college as well. So there was something about learning a foreign language that was exciting to me, and I don't think that it came easy, though.
Yeah. I mean, I only speak one language and I still struggle with that. Do you still practice speaking French at all? Or any of the languages that you grew up with?
I do not, unless I'm talking to someone when we're visiting India. You know.
Oh, that's cool. So growing up in Bombay, you call it Bombay. Still, it's no longer Bombay.
It was Bombay when I left.
Right.
I left for college when I was 18, and it was still Bombay at the time. So I held on to that.
Yeah.
And what is it called now?
Mumbai.
Bombay.
Yeah. That's where I went last year. It was amazing. I got to see the place where you grew up. It's beautiful. What was it like growing up in Bombay? Because, I mean, your kids are being raised here, and it's got to be a very different experience.
It is very different. I think about all the things I could do that I don't allow them to do here. Cars moved slower than they do now. I could get on the bus and I could go to the other end of the city and back home and get back home. I could walk myself to the park. I don't know what age I was, but I remember doing it much younger than they can do it.
Right. So you had more independence than they have.
I had independence, and because it's a pretty built up city. Everything is within a walk. You can walk to things. You can walk down to the store. You could walk to the park. When I was very young, I could walk to school. Until 2nd grade, I believe, I could walk to school. And then I took a bus to the junior elementary school for 3rd and 4th grade.
I've had such a novelty to walk to school. I mean, I walk to school too, but how many of our kids today walk to school?
It's true.
Not very many.
We all walked to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A whole nother world. So getting back to like your earliest memories, do you have some sort of story about an experience?
I
Or a teacher?
remember, as we're talking about the experience of living in Bombay, I remember being on the bus drive to school, or being in the car ride to school sometimes if my mom was taking us. And I would be looking out the window and imagining a video game character, like maybe Mario or some kind of video game character.
Pac-Man?
Maybe Pac-Man was running along whatever I could see, and I would have them jump up to the next wall and down to the next little spot they could land on. And, oh no, we ran out of wall and they crashed. But I remember looking out the window and creating some kind of world with my vision.
So interesting.
Would you describe yourself as a visual learner?
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all possess a little bit of kinesthetic and auditory, but we tend to lean to something. So would you just describe yourself as primarily visual?
I would say kinesthetic.
Yes.
Because it was kind of a full body experience, whatever I was learning. Yeah. And I think it's the powerful outcome of boredom.
I like this. I like where this is going.
Yeah, I do too. Tell us more.
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but when my kids tell me that they're feeling bored, I tell them, "Oh, you're so lucky. You get to feel bored. You don't have to be busy with stuff. That's fun."
It's I've never heard it pronounced it that way or described that way, and it's genius. Thank you.
You're so lucky.
You're so lucky. I like that.
I wish I could be bored more.
As adults, definitely, I wish I was bored more often.
I mean, all I'm doing at this stage of life is running, and not even running, like driving in a rush from one place to another.
Yeah.
That's what my life feels like right now.
Will you describe a little bit more about that? Boredom is fun and that you want more of it. So when you have I doubt you have much time right now, but when you've looked back on those times when you're bored, what has come from being bored for you?
I mean, for me, it's been time to rest my mind from everything else, right? There's always, our culture is full of like, you have to do this, you need to do this, it takes this to get here, it takes that to get there. And it's the pauses that bring some kind of relief. And then you can step back and look at, well, what's the big picture? Or how do I want to really spend my time?
Yeah. I think that's great. Thank you.
Did you have art lessons in your school, in elementary school?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember actually there being art lessons until I was in middle school.
Okay.
And I did take some art lessons before then. At some point, I knew that I wanted to take art lessons. And there's phases of my life where I kind of fought against being an artist because it takes time and resources. But I remember as a child asking my mom to sign me up for art lessons. And I was lucky in that I was in a family that could send me to learn how to play piano or play a sport or take an art lesson. I think she was looking for the right place or a teacher at one point. I remember her and I getting into something, and I was like, well, you still haven't signed me up for any art classes, and I really want to do that. And then she really got on it, and she signed me up for a once-a-week lesson.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were you about 6, 7?
I think I was older. I might have been 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So did you realize that art was something really important to you at that point?
Yeah, I did. When I was very young in elementary school, I remember that the school day was very structured. And most of us were just sitting at our desks. There was recess. When we were at the desk, it was a math lesson, a writing lesson, a reading lesson. It was a very structured school. But at some point in the day, the classroom teacher would say, okay, it's kitchen paper time. And this was my favorite time of day. And this is what it was. She would give us a piece of, I think, what you call newsprint or butcher paper.
Okay.
And it was literally a torn rectangle and a pencil. And we could have kitchen paper time, which meant we could draw whatever we wanted on this scrap of paper. And I just loved it because it was that pause. It was that time to just move the pencil on the paper, and I felt free.
Did you remember what other kids were doing with kitchen paper
I
time?
had no idea what they were doing. I was in my world.
So it was your chance to just pencil to paper.
Yeah,
And-
it's just a pencil and a piece of paper.
I love it.
So it sounds like your kitchen paper time really filled you up. Like it gave you something.
Yeah, it did.
Was that the first time you were having that feeling? Like, this is what I want to do. This is what feels good to me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, I have some early childhood memories of feeling the texture of the carpet and like seeing the plaid on the sofa. You can imagine like 70s furniture.
We lived it.
Yeah. And I have memories of that. I remember finding something really sharp and putting it in between the four squares of the tile on the floor and like getting it to stand up and feeling like, oh, I could do that. I made something. So I have some early memories of making and feeling and observing and experiencing. But kitchen paper time was.
I love kitchen paper time. It's so interesting because so many people that we talk to, oftentimes their earliest memory ties into who they are today and what they do or what they've chosen to do. So I feel like it starts at the beginning,
Yeah, and I feel lucky that I had a parent who supported that.
Was that unusual to support the arts?
I think it depends on your family culture.
Okay.
It didn't feel unusual to me. But as a grown-up, I've had Indian friends ask me, how did your parents even let you do that?
Interesting.
Why didn't they want you to be a doctor or an engineer? And I think they felt pressured in their families to go into a certain field.
Are either your parents artistic or are they in the arts at all?
Yeah, so my dad was a businessman. So he did different businesses that worked at the time. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom, but she did some things creatively to make a bit of an income. She would have clothes made for Indians that lived abroad and send it to them. And so there was a design aspect to it. Or she would design Indian jewelry and have it made and have that sent to them. So she didn't have a creative job per se, but she was being creative. Yeah.
Did you watch her put together the jewelry?
She took me to all kinds of places in Bombay where it would be, we would walk into a slum and then we would climb up this ladder and then we would be in the top level of this little shack. And inside there'd be all these people sitting huddled over these embroidery work tables and making beautiful, intricate things.
It's incredible.
So I got to just sometimes follow her around on her adventures, I guess.
Sometimes that's the best teaching of all, is to go explore and see things for yourself.
And observe, right?
So how long did you take these art classes for?
I took them, I would say, until I was maybe in 10th grade. Okay. And at that point, I was in art in school. Okay. And I could take it as an elective.
Oh, in high school?
In high school, okay. Yeah.
So you had more options as you got older?
I did, yes. Yeah.
And then you made a big leap. And so what did you think, like your junior year in high school?
I was very fortunate. I went to a high school where there was a college counselor. Mm-hmm. And most high schools in India end in 10th grade, and then you go to a vocational school or a college that's specific to the arts or to business college or science college. And a lot of students from my school stayed for 11th and 12th and had access to this college counselor and could apply to colleges outside of India or in other parts of India if they wanted to, if that's what they were interested in. So by then, I knew I really loved art. I also liked science. Math, I remember around 8th grade feeling like suddenly I was lost with math, which I think is a common experience for students. And so I applied to schools that had a good art, like art programs and a good biology or science programs because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and all small liberal art schools in the United States.
Very good. And so You landed on,
St. Olaf in Northfield, Minnesota.
Wow.
yes,
Just a little different than Bombay.
Yeah, a little different.
a little. No, I'm laughing. My mom went to a rival school, Augustus Davis University, which she
In
always talked-
Minnesota?
in Minnesota, another liberal arts college. So I've heard of St. Olaf several times.
Yeah, and it's a very beautiful campus. And when you're coming from India, what you see are the beautiful brochures that they send.
Yeah, because I can't imagine that you would have flown to have a visit.
I hadn't visited yet.
You just were like, okay, this is where I'm going.
I did apply to a lot of schools. I used the common application and I applied to a number of schools. And a lot of it was also dependent on, financial aid. And some schools had international student scholarships. So I was lucky I got one of those and I was able to come.
Okay, so you decided I'm going to St. Olaf. And had you experienced the cold winters?
I had not.
Well, that's a big
And
shock.
it was a big shock. And the college took very good care of me. They assigned me to a roommate who had to write an essay about why she wanted an international student as her roommate. And so she and her family actually took care of me. They took me shopping. They told me that I needed to get the really big, ugly winter coat because that's how I will survive. And the kind of shoes I should have. And they helped me get ready for the cold. And they had an international student advisor that I could go to for help if I needed it.
That's
I
such a
felt
long way.
well taken care of
I'm
at
so
St.
glad.
Olaf.
Good.
Yes,
That's wonderful. And you lived in the dormitories?
I did. And I was just so excited about everything I got to learn because the world of art opened up for me there. It was no longer pencil and paper.
No more kitchen.
No more kitchen paper. It was printmaking, and I could get into ceramics, and I could do sculpture, and I could try out welding, which I decided I never wanted to do again. And
How come?
well, I don't know. I put that helmet thing on, and then I couldn't see, and then I'm dealing with fire and metal, and
That wasn't your medium.
It was not my
choice.
medium of choice, but I got to try it out and learn that.
That's great.
So you were exposed to all these different new mediums. So exciting. How did that sort of expand your understanding of what art was or what art meant or how it felt?
I think it just meant that it could be so much more than I thought. My lessons in India with art were more about, choosing a picture that I could copy. And I got very good at copying things. And then I did feel like, okay, I'm ready for more, but I didn't know what there was.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Alex Kantrowitz. I'm the host of Big Technology Podcast, a longtime reporter and an on-air contributor to CNBC. And if you're like me, you're trying to figure out how artificial intelligence is changing the business world and our lives. So each week on Big Technology, I bring on key actors from companies building AI tech and outsiders trying to influence it, asking where this is all going. They come from places like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, and plenty more. So if you want to be smart with your wallet, your career choices, in meetings with your colleagues, and at dinner parties, listen to Big Technology Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Curious, Jenny and I were talking before. Do you feel like that copying, that art class of copying, do you feel like that's an important skill? Do you think that there's a place for that?
Yeah.
It's very different than creating, right?
Yes.
I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I think learning a skill is good and practicing a skill is good, just like we do in all subjects and we do in sports. Mm-hmm. So observing something, either a picture or an object, and learning how to represent it on a flat piece of paper or a canvas is a skill that you have to practice if you want to get better at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Was that something that you experienced then, or did that come later?
No, I really got into it in college, and I did, I worked on that skill whenever I could, but I made a lot of sculpture in college as well. And I think the part that was exciting to me was that art was not just about your skill, it was also about your ideas.
Do you have to explain your ideas, or is it because art is subjective? So I'm curious about your ideas being conveyed.
Well, that's something I really had to grapple with because as a female growing up in India, I didn't have much opportunity to speak up. And now I had to speak about my ideas. That's been a work in progress for me as an artist. And I really had to start practicing it in graduate school when you have to speak to your work and your work has to speak to your ideas without you there. It's a combination of both. You have to be aware of what you're saying to your viewer and who your viewer is by what your work is telling them.
Yes.
So you're not just in the creative like you're not just creating. There's a whole another piece that has to go along with it.
Yeah, it's just being aware of what you're putting out in the world to who.
How was time management creating these sculptures? I mean, things are eventually due. Were you one that struggled to get things done on time, or I'm just curious?
I was very motivated. I was a very motivated student. I would say I was highly engaged. So in college, it was my priority. I knew I was there. I knew that my time was limited, and I had access to the studio for a short time. So I really worked hard.
So did science fall by the wayside? Just curious, because you initially were really interested in science.
Yeah, I think the math was hard for me.
Oh,
if I
even
wanted to
in
go
science.
further into science, I had to be taking more math. And
As two people that it's not our strongest suit.
I could imagine that getting in the way. And then it sounds like you were so inspired artistically anyway that it was giving you a lot of purpose.
yes, it was a solid art department at that college. And I felt like there were endless possibilities there.
So then as it got closer to your time there, were you like, can I do this? Can I make a living at this?
Yeah,
What was your thought process?
That was my thought process even going into it. I was motivated to have a job. My mother didn't have a job, and her mother didn't have a job. So I think in my family, my generation is the first generation of women who are working and self-supporting. I was very motivated to do that. So I looked into different ideas and I tried different things. I did a digital art class and I thought maybe I would go into graphic design. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy making art on a computer that somebody else told me I needed to make. I thought I would do some scientific illustration, which I really enjoyed. And I didn't quite find where to go with it. I don't think that was a strong part of my college. I don't think they had a strong program in that. I took a lot of photography and I worked in the photography lab because I thought maybe I could be a photographer someday. But again, it's not a route that I went down.
But
And
you were being very mindful, though. You were really
I was
thinking the
thinking
whole
about it.
time, like, this is my passion.
Yeah.
Will this work in the real world?
Yes, I did internships. So I did an internship where I was photographing for a summer, and I was photographing a festival, and I was processing the photos. They were like being scanned and then processed and then archived. And again, I was spending a lot of time on the computer, and I didn't enjoy that part of it. The thing that got me into teaching and thinking about teaching was experiences that I had in high school in India. Because it was a private high school, there was a lot of opportunities for service and service learning. And I remember going to a school after my school was done, just to go and play with kids who were being brought in to have some kind of basic schooling there.
Was it like an after-school program for the young? Were they younger kids?
They were younger kids. There was one school they would send us to help kids with their homework because their families couldn't help them with English and math. So they would stay after their school day for basically tutoring by students from my school. Migrant workers who were in the city for construction who weren't going to school. They would bring those kids from the slums and they hired a teacher, and then we would go and help draw with the children or whatever they were learning, help them with what they were learning while they were there. And I think those experiences, it brought me a lot of joy, first of all, to work with kids. So I remembered feeling joyful with that. And I remembered thinking, oh, these kids are having such a hard life and they're still ready to learn and do things. And I really enjoyed that. So when I was in college, one of the things I thought I'd try is, well, let me go to the education department and see if I can take some art education classes and see how I feel about it. And because I was doing art education, I had to learn printmaking. I had to learn photography. I had to learn sculpture. I had to take all these core classes that exposed me to a lot more art as well, because that's what I would have to teach. So I went through that program. I think I started it my second year of college. And there was some student teaching at the end of college. And I got my license for kindergarten through 12th grade. But during my student teaching, I really, really loved working with the younger students the most. And the big reason is that I found that they were just so creative. Their minds were so open, and that was really fun and interesting for me.
Yeah. Do you find the younger ones are even more open than, say, 4th, 5th grade?
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think happens?
This is a good question.
Or what shifts?
Yeah. So, and I'm seeing the shift younger and younger, where there's this sort of feeling like I'm not an artist or I'm not good at it. I'm not exactly sure, but I wonder if it's how much exposure kids are getting to what they see on the internet or what they see other people making. You know, they're not just in their world. They're now in a different world where they're just visually, there's so much coming at them.
So much. And rapid fire. There's a lot of that research about 30-second blurbs. You know, it's rapid fire and it's quick and immediate.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that we're also living in this age of conscious parenting where we want to make conscious choices for our kids and we're thinking about it a lot. And sometimes maybe we're doing too much because how many opportunities do our kids have to be bored?
Right.
What do you mean? Don't have a plan?
Yeah, I'm going to say no times. No times.
I feel that.
No times.
There's a lot of good things out there and there's a lot of good ideas. You think, I want to do it all. But really to reset, you have to balance it with some downtime.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So yeah, creativity, it's so broad. I guess it's subjective too, but how would you define it for little ones, for big ones, or anybody?
Well, I think when we're all young, we're very creative. Our brains are just like that. You know, you see a young toddler crawling around and finding things and observing things and experiencing things. I think it's hard to define creativity. I think it's a combination of things. It's the observation. It's the visualizing. It's problem solving. Oh, I can't do it this way. Maybe I can do it this other way. And it's also skill building and developing a craft and pushing that craft over time and sustained practice.
Yeah, so if you don't practice building, sustaining and building your creativity, just like anything, it won't improve or it will maybe go away. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds very scientific.
Yeah.
Ooh. And that's what you also loved. Yeah, it's interesting because it's so broad.
It is. And if you have an idea and you don't actualize it, does that idea go away? Or does it land on someone else who's going to actualize it?
Yeah.
Something to ponder.
Yeah. It's a good fast forward. You graduated college. You landed your first teaching job at
In Los Angeles. At a
Angeles.
private independent school in Los Angeles.
Right.
And,
And you remained there for quite a while.
I was there for 15 years. And I was fortunate because it was a progressive school. And I didn't know really what that meant at the time. But what it meant for me as an educator was that I got to try a lot of different things in the classroom. And I also got to have a lot of professional development. They were often having speakers come in to speak to the faculty or sending us to workshops and trying to be on the cutting edge of education the best they could. And I felt like I spent that 15 years really just learning and learning and learning. So I didn't stop learning the whole time I was there.
That's, I think, all good teachers, such as yourself, it's always learning. It's not being stagnant and saying, well, we've done this every year and this is how I do it. It's always being open to what are the best forms of engagement.
Yeah.
So take us back to that first year, because we've had a whole episode on first year teaching.
Well, I was fortunate that I've been really lucky. I've always been in these kind of co-teaching roles.
Nice.
That year my first year I was an associate teacher, and there was a part of me that was like, why didn't they hire me as the head teacher? And I'm so glad they didn't. I learned so much from the experienced teachers that I was working with. They had years of teaching art under their belts. And
Did you have multiple co-teachers?
yeah, there were 2 part-time lead art teachers. So one came in the morning, one came in the afternoon. And they both had different styles and different ways of teaching. One taught the really young ones, and the other taught, I believe, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Okay. And so I just learned a lot from both of them. And then I got a lead teaching position there my 3rd year.
Okay.
So
Did you have your own studio, or did you have to go to people's classes?
no, it was a beautiful art studio in the middle of campus.
Nice.
And then were you also mentoring others like yourself who started? Or did you just become a teacher?
I was a teacher, and the year I became a teacher, they made it into a co-lead teacher position. So we hired another basically a teaching partner that was my equal. And then I had several teaching partners over the years that were co-lead teachers with me.
Oh,
so it sounds like at that school you were really able to work on developing your philosophy of teaching art.
Yeah. So when I started teaching, I was really following the lesson plans that you could get that were published in a book or that I had developed during my college years. And those lessons usually tied in with art history, and there was a making part of it, art production, and then skill building as well. But they were very structured lessons. And I remember I used to write out everything I was going to say so that I didn't miss anything, you know, and I had these elaborate lesson plans. But what I found was that so much of it was unpredictable because you don't know where the kids are going to go with it. You don't know what they're going to see in the piece of art that you show them. And I started to find little tweaks that I started to make along the way. I'm not going to demonstrate making a flower for this project because then they'll all make a flower for this project. And then I want them to make what they're going to make. I want them to use their thinking. Unless we were doing a skill builder where they were making observation drawing of a flower or something like that. But I wanted my demonstrations to not always affect what their output was going to be. So I started to tweak things that way. And I still do 25 years later when I'm demoing a project. I just think about it a little bit more. Okay, we're going to be making family portraits or self-portraits. I don't need to show kindergartners everything. they draw people a certain way at this age, and I want to see where they're at. So maybe I'll show them I'll demo just drawing an oval for the face and start with that and talk about what I might do next. But I don't need to show them all the steps. I want to see if they're doing stick figures, or I want to see if they're drawing clothes, or I want to see if they're able to add more at that age.
So there's a lot to think about. So the age and stage and what's developmentally appropriate. And then you do some skill building, but then you also want to bring in creative process.
Yes. So the creative process when they're young is very big because they're in the creative process with everything they're doing. And if you do too much skill building early on, then it gets stuck in like, I'm not good at that. So
would you say the skill building comes later on?
Well, we're always learning skills.
Yes.
We're always learning even how to hold a pencil or what does this material do? What can I do with it? Where can I use it? Where can I not use it? How do I take care of it? How do I clean it? Where does it belong in the art studio? We're learning all kinds of skills all the time.
What has kept you inspired for 25 plus years of teaching? What keeps you going?
I love looking at young kids' art. I just love it so much. I love it when the figure is floating up in the sky, and then as the child grows, it lands on a line that's maybe representing grass. And then at some point, the sky comes down and it meets the earth instead of it being this one floating blue strip at the top. And I just love looking at their art.
Yes.
I really appreciate what you're saying because I think as kindergarten teachers, it's not that we don't love looking at it. We love it as well, but I think we're much more focused on helping them develop skills than the creative process. So I'm sort of getting a different, you're opening up my mind in a different way to how I look at their art and the way that I teach them because there's so much drawing and coloring in kindergarten, right? But I'm always like, oh, what if you had your person landing on the ground? Like your feet are floating up. So I do the opposite of what you're saying. Like, I'm like, add the ground.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation because I think there is developmental stage where kids will see things differently at different ages.
Right.
And where they land on that development can shift as well.
Yep. There's a wide range.
I mean, this is why I teach art. I get to really appreciate all of it.
And it's so nice because you see them from the time they're 5 to the time they're 12.
Right. That's right. Yeah, I see them grow over time.
So how do you see children using art to express their feelings? I guess it depends on, the child, because not every child is going to be having that experience, right? But maybe some kids are processing their feelings when they're doing art.
Well, what's nice about having a once-a-week art class in a school is it does give the kids a different outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be quiet or it can be active. Sometimes we allow students to choose their material. So a kid who loves to draw will choose drawing. That might be calming for them. A kid who loves clay and the feeling of clay might choose that. It gives them a chance to express in a different way. And some kids like it to be more, group-oriented, so they'll work together with other students, or some kids want to be in their own little world. And the art really gives them all of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I just remembered who the artist was. It was Kusum, the dots, the Japanese woman.
Yes, Yayoi Kusama.
Yeah, Yayoi Kusama. Yeah, she talked about that she suffered from a lot of anxiety when she was young in her early age. And so art was the thing that really fed that for her. So that's where I heard that. It wasn't a conversation that I had, but I think about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely kids that feel that and you see it.
Yeah.
And
And I've heard kids say that. We've heard older students who've come back and have shared things about art, saying that this is what they use to calm themselves down, or this is where they feel they're happiest, or
Hi, this is Alex Kantrowitz. I'm the host of Big Technology Podcast, a longtime reporter and an on-air contributor to CNBC. And if you're like me, you're trying to figure out how artificial intelligence is changing the business world and our lives. So each week on Big Technology, I bring on key actors from companies building AI tech and outsiders trying to influence it, asking where this is all going. They come from places like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, and plenty more. So if you want to be smart with your wallet, your career choices, in meetings with your colleagues, and at dinner parties, listen to Big Technology Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
I wanted to ask, can you describe the difference between process-focused and product-focused art?
Yeah. So product-focused art is when the teacher has a specific outcome in mind of what it should look like, or the artist has a specific outcome in mind.
That's product-focused.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And process-focused is, it's more open-ended. Mm-hmm. You don't know where you're going to end up. You may have some parameters of materials or subject or scale, but you don't know what it's going to look like yet.
Yeah.
Do you think as children get older that the process focused can be more challenging for them because of what you said earlier about their creativity?
Yeah, I think it gets harder when you spend a lot of time in a school environment and everything is so structured. And then you go to the art class and the outcome of it is also structured. And you're not getting the time in your day and in your week and in your month to practice your creative thinking skills. It's important to have both. You need to practice skill building to make a product, to get your ideas out. And you also need to practice your creative thinking. So as a teacher in the arts, that's where my learning is always like grappling between the two with the time I have with the students.
It's a fine line, and it's not easy. So balancing both product focus and process is important equally.
It's a great conversation because I feel like as a regular classroom teacher, it's important to be, not that we're unaware, but I feel like we're so busy with teaching skills and product that we don't always think about that part. You notice students who are creative, but I feel like, and I know we do things to foster their creativity. I know.
Or at a free choice.
Yeah, for sure. That's for sure.
It's a little kitchen paper time.
Well, and also a lot of what we do is open-ended. A lot of the things we do. So I'm just thinking about creativity in the classroom, in a regular classroom. I think some teachers would probably be more open to it than others, but I think it's so important everywhere.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you just have a little kitchen paper time.
Yeah, we actually do have a lot in kindergarten.
You're not regular teachers. You're magical kindergarten teachers.
We try. What do you see develop in children over time when they are given space to create?
Well, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about my children.
Okay, yes.
Right now. So what's been really fun for me as a mom is seeing all of the different things that my kids will get interested in and where they go with it or how far they go with it and how much time and energy they put into each thing when they're interested in it. When my older son was very little, our table was set up right next to the recycle bin. And he started to discover all the recycling that we would put in there and pulling out egg cartons and whatnot and basically covering his table with this stuff that was like treasure for him and making things out of it. And that was really fun to watch. And then as he got older, he was also more active in wanting to be outside and run around and play outside a lot. And now as a middle schooler, it's fun to see him doing both things. So he's really into tennis right now and has decided he wanted to be on the tennis team. So he tried out for it. And he's taking art as an elective and really interested in painting and drawing and learning skills from a teacher that's not his mother. And that's been fun for me to watch, that growth. And he also went through a phase where he wanted to learn photography. I think he was 9, and I thought to myself, well, you're too young. I can't teach you black and white photography. So we went to the library and we got a book about black and white photography. And he's one of those super reader kids. So he read the book, and then he somehow, I guess, knew all about f-stop and exposure and metering. And he was at a camp at a community center. And there was a flyer on the wall, and it said photography classes. And he said, Mom, you have to sign me up for this. And it was black and white photography. And I looked at the flyer and I said, no, it says you have to be 10 and over to take the class. And he went and he spoke to the director. She was there. And he said, I'm 9, but I want to take this class. And she said, okay. And it was a once-a-week class for 2 hours. And I drove him there. I sat there. He took the class. It was him and a bunch of adults. And they started him with like a regular manual camera. And then they progressed to a camera with a bigger lens. And they taught him how to develop film. And they taught him how to print the photos. And I mean, it was the whole thing. He did it for 2 years. As a parent, if you provide those opportunities, or sometimes you let them find it for themselves, how far they go with it and what they do with it. And I know it's all in there.
Oh, yes.
You know, that 2 years of photography is in there. It's going to come out somewhere.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that
really
he advocated for himself to talk to the director and go and start a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
I like that.
That definitely shapes your perspective on creativity.
I mean, it can really be anything that a person is interested in, because that's where engagement lies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What are some simple ways parents can support creativity at home?
I think, pull up that recycle bin. Let them use the cardboard.
Yeah, they love cardboard.
They don't want the toys. They want the box. Let them have it.
It's a lot less expensive, too.
Give them some tape.
Tape is magic.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of parents worry about mess in their home, and I completely understand that. But it could be a pencil and a sketchbook. It could be any of those things. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. If you have the space that can be messy, just put drop cloth over it and have some simple watercolor paints available if you want to do that, but you don't have to.
When I was at your house, your son showed me the most incredible thing to do with those packing. What are those called? Those white
Mailers?
The packing peanuts.
The packing peanuts.
Okay.
The styrofoam packing
Yes.
peanuts that are just like terrible for the environment. But he showed me that if you wet them, they stick together. And he was making these little people with them. And I was like, you're actually a genius.
Well, those are not the styrofoam ones.
Okay.
They're the biodegradable.
Oh, that's what works.
You can use those, but yeah.
So buy the biodegradable ones.
You don't have to buy them. They come in your Amazon box
Hey.
sometimes.
Find them in your Amazon cart and keep them because they're so much fun.
Yeah.
Just put the tiniest little bit of water on them and connect them, and then you can make a whole sculpture.
I love it.
The other thing I would suggest for parents is to step back and observe. When kids are very young and they're exploring with materials, let it be their time. If they want to engage with you, you could ask them, what are you making? What are you thinking? If they ask you, how do I make something? You could say, how do you make a something? And then see what they do. Sometimes if you ask the question back or you
ask it back.
pause, then they will show you.
So like shifting towards exploration not like it's the process, not the product. right?
Exactly. They're looking to you sometimes for your approval. And if you don't think it's good, they won't think it's good. If you don't think it's art, they won't think it's art.
So
just
would you
observe.
recommend it's more of a question rather than, wow, that's amazing? Say more, like, tell me more about your project.
Yeah, as an educator, I avoid the great job or
Yes.
good job or that's amazing. One, because there's no way I can do that to 25 kids in their room.
100%,
So the person
yes.
who doesn't get it thinks that is terrible. The other reason is I want them to decide. I want them to feel good.
Yes.
I do have a story of my son when he was little asked me, he made kind of a zigzag line on a piece of paper. And then he said, look, Mom, I made the ocean. How do I finish it? And I repeated back to him, how do you finish it? And he took the end of the line and he brought it around to the edge of the paper and he connected it to the beginning of his line. And then he started to fill it in. And he said, look, I finished it. I made the ocean. And that's what we want.
Yes.
We want them to finish what they started.
Right.
And we want them to feel like they did it. So they do it more.
Yes.
And the more they do, the better they get.
That's great. It takes practice and practice and practice all the time.
Because I do notice the young students often saying, I don't know what to do, or I don't have an idea. So in those cases, and they're truly stuck, they will sit there for 40 minutes and do nothing.
When they have a piece of paper. I mean, we have a lot of references in the art studio if they want to look at something. If they're looking for inspiration, we
Yes.
have resources for them. Sometimes it can just be like, go look outside.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Sometimes you just need to take a moment, a break, drink of water.
That's happening at a younger and younger age. But I don't remember that happening when I started teaching. Where young kids are getting stuck.
Getting stuck.
Kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've had parents say, well, they're just perfectionist. And if they don't get it just the way they want it. So what do you recommend? How do we get them
Unstuck.
unstuck?
Well, I would look at the entire environment.
Okay.
Where are they learning what perfectionist is? Where are they learning what perfection is? When does that begin? I had a friend over with her daughter and her son recently, and these are lovely, conscious parenting parents who are trying to be very intentional about their choices with their children. And she had told me earlier in the day that in my family, I wasn't considered the artist my older sister was. And I asked her, well, why do you think? And she said, I don't know. Every time my sister made something, it was amazing and beautiful. And when I made it, it wasn't. And so I didn't pursue the arts, even though I enjoyed doing it. And then they were at my house and the kids came into my studio and the son climbed up onto the chair and was drawing on a piece of paper. And then the toddler, she's 2, followed him and she couldn't get up to the chair. So she took a piece of paper, she put it on the floor, and then she held this pencil between her very tiny fingers and was starting to make marks on the paper. And right then, my friends, just as she got her first mark down, my friend said to her, oh, you're making the sun. A sun has rays. And because we had had the conversation that we'd had earlier, I said, look, this is exactly where it starts. She's trying to do what her brother is doing, her older brother. And where she's at is trying to balance this pencil between her fingers and make marks on the paper. That's what she's working on right now. And sometimes it's good to just observe where your kids are and see what they're ready for, just like we do with reading. And, they can't skip the crawling to start walking.
That's really helpful.
That is helpful. And then you can hang it up. and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we go into some personal reflection and hope?
Yeah, let's talk about hope.
Okay. So, as someone who is working on my creative freedom, what do you say to someone who feels like, I don't know how to draw. I'm not creative. I don't have it.
Well, I would ask you, do you enjoy drawing?
Not like you.
But your creativity shows in a lot of
Different
other
ways. I have found I'm enjoying it a little bit more because I've decided just to doodle and not have a outcome.
Well, I'm a doodler. I support doodling.
Yeah.
Yeah. You asked me for the definition of creativity.
Yes.
I would say nature.
That's a
It's
good
the
one.
ultimate creation.
That's beautiful.
When you look at something beautiful in nature, you could look at a million photos of the Grand Canyon, but it never beats that first feeling of seeing it in real life.
It's breathtaking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And inspirational.
I think that whatever brings you joy and brings you that kind of mental break, that relaxation, some people do it because it's a meditation. Some people do it because it gets their mind firing with ideas. I think you find what works for you, especially in our busy lives, you know.
I mean, I know you said that children are showing signs of being less creative, but what gives you hope when you think about children and creativity today? Because there's so much creativity, more creativity than not, wouldn't you say?
I think that if you've been to a museum or an art gallery recently, you'll see that art is so many things. And it's so much more than maybe what we thought it was, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And I think the thing that gives me hope is that there's more of an understanding now in education about kids needing more full body experiences and getting off screens more. And that brings me hope. I think that if we can go back to some of the things that they had more access to, more downtime, more free time, more free play, more just things that are tactile, I think that gives me hope.
That's great. Thank you. I know. Should we go into our speed round now, where we ask you some questions and just whatever comes up the top of your
Okay,
head?
I'm ready.
Okay. They're not too bad. Your favorite art supply?
I like a good pencil. I really like black charcoal pencils. Those are my favorite.
Nice.
Very good.
What's your favorite medium?
I'm a clay artist. I do pottery.
Beautiful pottery.
I want to, before we go to the next speed round question, tell us about your studio because I have not been there. Tell me, create a picture of your studio.
I have multiple studios.
What?
I have the art studio where I teach.
Okay.
Which is
It's a beautiful space. It's where I spend most of my time. I don't spend my time there making anything, but it's a place where things are made. I have a studio membership at a local pottery studio. So I can take pieces there to fire and glaze. That's a lovely place too. And I don't make it there as often as I would like. In my home, there is a room attached to the garage that I think it used to be somebody's office at some point. And I just have a simple table set up and some shelves and materials. And that's where I do all the clean work. I also did a lot of Zoom teaching in that room during the pandemic. And in the garage, there's a little messy space with a shelf and a work table and a pottery wheel.
So it sounds beautiful.
It is.
I was going to say at your art studio at school, it seems like a great time to observe so much art and take that all in.
It is an art factory in there. 350 students come through it every week.
Wow.
Making and making and making.
350. That's a lot of students.
Is there a student moment you'll never forget? Or something that happened?
Yes, and it has nothing to do with art, but everything to do with young kids and how they observe the world. I remember I was pregnant with my first child, and I think we hadn't had the kindergarten class in a few weeks, and because of holidays or whatnot, and I hadn't told them yet that I was going to go on maternity leave. So they walked into the room, and a couple of students right away, called out, "Miss Kusum, why are you so fat?" And someone else said, "Do you have a baby?" And before I was planning to have them come sit down and talk to them, and before I could, it just all came out there because they're so attuned and they just observe and they just say exactly what's on their mind.
Yes, they do.
In the moment, no hesitations.
That is so true.
And last question is, do you have one word for creativity?
Curiosity, maybe? I have a definition that a student made for what we asked them, what is art? And one of my students said, art is something that hasn't been created before.
Wow.
That's a good quote.
Yeah, I love that one.
Well, thank you. Those were great answers to all those questions. Should we talk about our big little lesson?
For sure. So my big little lesson is the thought about originally, I think for a lot of people, when you think about creativity, you do think about product and the final result and good art, but it goes so much deeper. It goes so much deeper. And I love when you were talking about the idea of having an idea, the creative process. So I think, understanding for everybody, for teachers and parents, the concept of what it means to be a creative person and how we can foster that in our own children and in ourselves. Because a lot of times I say to myself, I want to be more creative, but I know I'm creative, but I don't give myself time to be creative or allow myself to be creative or to let those thoughts like fully evolve. So I think just understanding how broad the concept of creativity is, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, my big little lesson for sure is twofold, but one is I think the word boredom is really essential to being able to settle your mind, to open the possibilities to be creative. And I think that we avoid boredom at all cost, sometimes out of necessity, but other times it's like, I don't want to just sit and be idle. But that is where the creative spirit can really open up. It's not a fast pace. Sometimes it needs to slow burn and build. So,
and we also don't allow our children enough time for boredom. So say what you said about boredom again. Oh, you're so lucky.
You're so lucky you
You're
get
so
to be
lucky.
bored.
You're so lucky.
And I want to go back to your question about how do you support a student when they're stuck? Because that's part of it. I think that when they are stuck, are we anxious to get them somewhere? Where are we trying to get them? And why are we so anxious about it?
there's my
Can they be stuck?
That's the big little lesson.
Can they just be stuck?
Yeah, can they just be stuck?
Can they just take their pen or their pencil, put it on the paper and doodle? And what's wrong with that? Can they start with a mark?
Wow.
That's the big little lesson.
Yeah,
That was perfect. I'm so glad you brought that up.
So we'd like to leave our listeners with some optional homework.
Yes. And so this week, sit down, create with your child, no instructions, no expectations, no end goal. And then when they're done, instead of praising the product, simply ask, just tell me more about your picture.
I love that. Just tell me more about it, for sure.
It was such a joy to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was so fun.
You're wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, listeners, thank you so much for listening today. We might not have all the answers, but we have a lot of experience.
Lots.
And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with a parent or teacher in your life.
Because sometimes the smallest moments hold the biggest lessons. See you next time.
This is Mike Volo of Lexicon Valley.
And I'm Bob Garfield. Are you one of those people who sometimes uses words?
Do you communicate or acquire information with, language?
Hey, us too. So join us on Lexicon Valley to chew over the history, culture, and many mysteries of English, plus some wisecracks.
Find us on one of those apps where people listen to podcasts.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.